Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. So today I'm going to be chatting with you / kind of reviewing a book that I read last week, and that is Iola Leroy or Shadows Uplifted by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. So as I mentioned in my Geekly wrap-up, I found out about this book through a different nonfiction book that I am reading, and I'm trying to read all of the primary works that are mentioned in the nonfiction book so that I can get a better understanding of the author's thesis there. I also, funnily enough, found a video on Seji, the Artisan Geek's channel. So she made a video that was more Black classics that I know you've never heard of, which I will leave linked down below. And funnily, the only one that I had heard of was Iola Leroy because I was currently reading it. So thank you, Seji, for making that video, because I also got a lot of really good recommendations from it and ideas of things that I want to read next. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Iola Leroy because I'm honestly kind of shocked that I had never even heard of this novel, because it's like right in the time period that I focused on a lot when I was studying American Lit in graduate school, and I just didn't come up, which seems kind of shocking to me. I know that it's taught a lot in like African American Lit courses because it's one of the first novels published by an African American woman in the US, but I had never heard of it before, and it's really good. So let's go ahead and talk about the author of the book a little bit first. So Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, like I said, was one of the first African-American woman novelists that was published in the United States. She started her career as a journalist for several anti-slavery publications, religious publications. She was also a poet, a teacher, a sewist, a bunch of other different jobs that she did over the course of her life. And Iola Leroy actually wasn't published until she was 67 years old. So that's really cool. There is this great quote that I want to read to you that is from the speech that she gave in 1866 to the National Women's Rights Convention. And it kind of typifies, I think, a lot of the themes that I'm going to talk about when we talk about Iola Leroy, about how the cause of women in the United States needs to include women of all races, not just white women, because this book is very critical of feminism or proto-feminism that only includes white women and white women's issues and things like that. There's going to be some language that is what she used at the time that we don't use now to describe Black people, so just be aware of that, but that is part of the quote. So here is the quote from her speech. "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. You white women speak here of rights. I speak of wrongs. I, as a colored woman, have had in this country an education which has made me feel as if I were in the situation of Ishmael, my hand against every man and every man's hand against me. While there exists this brutal element in society which tramples upon the feeble and treads down the weak, I tell you that if there is any class of people who need to be lifted out of their airy nothings and selfishness, it is the white women of America." So this is kind of a common theme throughout a lot of Harper's writing in Iola Leroy, is this idea that if we are to have equal rights for all women, those equal rights truly need to be for women across races, because she is extremely critical in the novel of the ways in which white women will side with people that are of the same race as them and just allow violence to occur to Black women, and indeed be people that inflict violence upon Black women as well. So I thought that that was a good quote that was worth reading, because it also got her in hot water with a lot of the more popularly discussed women's suffragists at the time, like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And it's very important to remember that those women were working just for suffrage for white women and not for all women, and that is problematic as fuck. So also interesting is that Frances E.W. Harper refused to give up her seat for a white woman on a streetcar 100 years before Rosa Parks' landmark refusal to give up her seat on a bus as well. So I also thought that that was interesting. Like, this woman was truly like on the front lines of activism for racial justice and equality in America. And it is very worth mentioning because, like I said, I don't know how many people actually know about her. So what is this book about? This book is about the title character, Iola Leroy, and her family. Iola Leroy and her brother are both very light-skinned Black people. They are so light-skinned, in fact, that they can pass as white. Their father is a white man who is a plantation owner, and he married a Black woman who used to be his slave, who he freed so that he could marry. And Iola and her brother are raised without any knowledge that their mother used to be a slave or that their mother is Black, and they are as well, because their father believes that he needs to raise them as white so that they don't experience the like mistreatment and racism in the United States. I should mention that this takes place, her childhood is pre-Civil War, but most of the action of the novel takes place at the very tail end of the Civil War, going into early Reconstruction. Of course, then their father dies, and one of his old enemies, knowing this sort of secret, quote-unquote, about Iola's birth, conspires to get back at her father by kidnapping his children and selling them into slavery in the South, which is, incidentally, the first time Iola actually learns that she is Black and has been raised to pass as white her entire life. So she's kidnapped as a child, sold into slavery in the South. Her brother is able to escape by laying low because he has the help of some teachers in the North that understand his situation and are willing to hide him from the people that want to sell him into slavery. So a lot of this book is concerned with Iola's desire to be reunited with her family after the war. The book opens with her working as a nurse in this hospital at the very end of the war, and she is just described as this like amazingly angelic and virtuous woman. She is very skilled. She's very good at her job of being a nurse. She is very well-spoken and able to, you know, like hold her own in arguments with the men, which is something that like not every woman character in a book that's published in this time necessarily always does. So I really appreciated that. And she ends up discovering that one of the people that she has taken care of in the hospital is actually her uncle, Robert. And he is also trying to go find his mother, who was enslaved in the South. And he wants to make sure that like in her old age, she's able to, you know that she's free and be reunited with her family and all of that kind of thing. In addition to the plot about like people going and finding their lost family members, there is also this marriage plot that happens where Iola is, you know, she's a very like beautiful young single woman working in like an all-male environment. So she attracts the attention of this white man, Dr. Gresham, who tries to convince her that she should basically like give up her identity as Black. It's a lot of like problematic stuff with that, of course, because it's not like you can just choose to take off your ethnicity like it's an outfit. You can't. But he basically is trying to convince her that she needs to like leave behind her racial identity and marry him because she is this sort of like exceptional example of Black womanhood, and she's like not like those other Black women in his estimation. He has this idea that she should marry him because she is good enough, that she's practically white anyway. Obviously, Iola has a lot of problems with this, and she tries to explain to him that like that's not how identity and community and family works. She tries to explain to him that like while he may not be individually prejudiced against her because of her race, how would he then feel if, you know, they were to have children together and their children were to be darker skinned than either of their parents? Would he still then have these like more enlightened ideas about having like Black family members? And he's a little, you know, like sheepish and shamefaced because of course, he didn't really think about that. He's coming at this perspective. He's coming to this relationship with the perspective that it's automatically better to be white, so why would Iola ever choose to throw in her lot with the newly freed Black people? What he doesn't understand is the importance of community and family in this story. Community and family is a recurring theme in this novel, and also in like the other domestic and sentimental type novels of the time. So this is a genre of novels that came out at the time that focus a lot on themes of home and family, virtuous womanhood, you know, this sort of redemption through doing the right thing, like having your good morals and being a good Christian will pay off for you because you will be rewarded, if not in life, then you will be rewarded in the afterlife when you go to heaven. So that is the kind of thing that Iola is really focused on, and she, together with her uncle Robert, end up going to the South to try and find their long-lost family members. There is another element to the plot, like the marriage plot, where she meets Mr. Leroy, who is the man that she eventually ends up marrying, who is another light-skinned Black man that has gone through something similar. And like, this is something that I'm still kind of new to learning about, but this theory of like Black exceptionalism being coined by W.E.B. Du Bois, and he had this idea that like there needed to be a very small cadre of exceptional elite Black people that were responsible for lifting everybody up. We can get into why that's an issue as well, because like you shouldn't need to be exceptional in order to have like equal rights, you know, like equal rights are something that everyone should just have regardless of how exceptional or successful they are. But that is a major theme of this story, the idea that like exceptional Black people will uplift all Black people because they'll bring things like education and equality, and they will be good community leaders. And that is very much why Mr. Leroy ends up being the person that Iola chooses to marry, because they both are going to like work together for the advancement of their race. That's something that they talk about a lot together in the book, and something that is mostly like the last third of the book is them going to these like paper reading societies where various people are arguing like for or against suffrage for Black people or enfranchisement or equal economic opportunities, and they go there and Iola just like argues with all of these old racist white guys that are just like, Black people need white people to take care of them, and she just takes them down with all the precision of a fully trained lawyer. And it's just like, nope, this is not where our human rights come from. They are innate to us. And she points out a lot of the flaws in like the racist talking points of the time. That's something that I thought was really interesting about this book, and why I think more people should read it now, is because sometimes I hear that like, well, things were different back then. People didn't really talk about race back then. They didn't talk about racism back then, etc., etc. They did talk about those things back then. It's just that like what our culture that privileges like whiteness and white voices chooses to focus on is very often looked at through a lens of the people that were part of the quote unquote like dominant or more privileged race of the time. This book is very much a takedown of white feminism. The white women in this book are, and I mean like this is pre-feminism as a word, but like the women's movement is beginning in this book. It's beginning with the Temperance Movement, which was this wider movement that was tied up in women's suffrage at the time, that was basically designed as a way to get people to not have unfettered access to alcohol all the time. You might be wondering why that's part of the women's movement. Essentially, it was because it started out as an anti-domestic violence campaign. So there was a campaign on the part of all of these American women that they needed to stop unfettered access to alcohol because their husbands and fathers and the other men in their lives would go out and get drunk and then come home and beat up the women in the house. So the temperance movement and the like women's movement and women's suffrage movement are very closely tied and very closely like examined in this book, because Iola is very much part of this wider temperance movement. But another big part of the temperance movement is that, or of like Iola's political consciousness, is the fact that she takes down a lot of the hypocrisy of the white women that she sees. So there's this idea in like the cult of true womanhood that like white women specifically are more innocent, they're more pure, they need to be protected, they don't have any power outside of the domestic sphere. Iola Leroy complicates this because it talks about like white women that are, you know, the wives and daughters of plantation owners, and how far from being like these helpless, you know, virtuous women that are looking on in horror at like the evils of slavery and the evils of the plantation system, they're actually like perpetuating the violence in those systems, and they are the ones that in many ways are responsible for the buying and selling of Black human beings. So Iola does kind of a takedown of this, and like a takedown of the way in which like white women are supposedly more virtuous and more Christ-like. Christianity is another huge theme in this book. Like a specific modes of Christianity are massive parts of the plot and character development, and Iola is constantly having to point out the hypocrisy of white plantation owners and their wives claiming to be Christians and following the teachings of Jesus, but basically just twisting them and using them for their own ends, right? Like using quotes from the Bible to justify slavery, or using these like pseudo-religious sermons and such, basically to be aggressive to Black people, to quote unquote keep them in their place, kind of thing. That's a big part of what the nonfiction novel is that or the nonfiction book that I'm reading is, From Slave Cabins to the White House. It talks a lot about how Iola Leroy is a way in which, or depicts a way in which Iola is able to basically like be creative and create her own definitions of success and succeed and achieve, despite all of this like know your place aggression from the white people in her life. And the whole thesis of that nonfiction book is that like Black achievement has always been the norm, and like white anger and reactionary behavior has been the response to that, as opposed to white people oppress Black people survive and thrive despite oppression. The idea is that like Black people survive and thrive, white people get angry and try to destroy that. So this is a really interesting book. Like it's one of those books that like I think everybody should read, because these conversations that we're having about like intersectional feminism, and these conversations that we're having about the, you know, multiple marginalization of Black women are not new conversations. These are things that people have been talking about and discussing and debating for literally hundreds of years. But I don't see books like this being talked about as much in things like, you know, your freshman Lit 101 type classes. So I would definitely recommend that more people read this book. This book does have some writing style differences that might make it a little weird to read at first. It can get a little confusing because the book starts out with a lot of time jumps, and you're not necessarily sure how all the characters are related to each other. So maybe read like a plot summary before you read it, just so you know who all the characters are, and so it's easier for you to understand like when the timeline is jumping. But yeah, like this is a really well-studied book too. So like if you want to go learn more about it, there's critical apparatus out there for you. Like if you want to find ways to read more about this book and other books that are in its tradition, absolutely go read more about that. This book also focuses a lot on like Christianity and temperance, like I said. So read it with like Wikipedia open to use as a resource, because it is easier to follow and understand the more you know about that period in history, although it isn't strictly speaking necessary. I think you'll still be able to like get the gist of what's going on. You know, like the characters will occasionally go off on these like multiple paragraph monologues that are a little bit more like moral essays that get inserted into the book. So it doesn't read so like dialogue so much as it reads like a didactic section where it's like, okay, this character that I set up as admirable is now going to give a speech about why it's bad that like white people are coming into Black communities flooding them with alcohol and then saying, oh, like, black people are alcoholics and therefore they shouldn't vote. And then they'll say that like as a whole essay. So you'll still be able to like get the gist of it just from the book, but it might be nice to also have like some nonfiction or some like extra summary out there to help support your reading of this. So in conclusion, I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. Again, it's a little bit hard to rate like older books, but I thought it was really excellent, and I think more people should definitely read it. Once again, I want to thank you, Seji, for making your video about this, because it inspired me to make just a straight up review of this book. So thank you so much. Make sure that you all check out her channel, which is going to be linked down below as well. And if you like this video and you would like to see more of what I do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. That is the best way to get updated every time I post a new video. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.